Hi, hello, Vanakkam and welcome back to yet another episode on Little's Law YouTube channel. So in one of my previous videos on why should we do performance baseline or baseline testing, I got a comment asking for an example on how to perform a baseline test. So he has a requirement of 200 users for 1 hour and you want to understand how to do a baseline testing for an application. So in this video we will see how to do a baseline testing for an application. So I'll go with an example. So here I have the application, so I will take you through the steps on how to perform a baseline test. So the first thing is we have to understand the requirements. So when it comes to understand the requirements is defining the baseline criteria. So that's the very first step, and there are several other steps to define the baseline. So before we move on to the video, I request you all to subscribe to our channel if you have not subscribed yet. Please don't forget to like the video and don't forget to share it with your friends. So as I told you, the very first part is defining the baseline criteria. So we have to clearly articulate the criteria that defines a successful baseline. So in our case, it's achieving and sustaining 200 transactions per minute as per the requirement, or we have to run a load test with 200 users for 1 hour. So that's the baseline criteria. So now the second part is we have to identify the key transactions. So when it comes to identifying the key transactions, we have to pinpoint the specific transactions or user transactions that contribute to the transaction count. So this could include actions like user logins, form submissions, or any other critical actions in our application. So in our example, so I have created 3 different scripts so that I can emulate you a real-time scenario. So the first script I have is login script. So in this, the user will log in the application and then he will log out of the application. So this is again a typical scenario. And then the second script which I have is browsing the product. So for this again, I have some transactions where the user will browse through the products, and then the third one is checking out items where the user will add an item and he will check out the item. So on top of this, when you're running a baseline, it has to be in a clear and a final product. So for example, this script or this setup has to be used for your load test. So the same set or the same design should be followed for the baseline. So you have to again use the same exact one for your load tests. For example, like if I'm running this test with 200 users, I have to use the same script without any modifications. So I can rather change the test data, for example the login, but I should not change any of these transactions, or I should not add any of the transactions, or I should not add any delays to it. So that's the reason I have created the final set of script where I have added the delays, where I have named the transactions, and everything is done and complete. So I have 3 different scripts. I have checked it, I have validated all those scripts. Every script works fine, there are no functional issues, and everything looks fine. So that's a final script, which is the identifying of key transactions, where we have identified that we have to know the response times of these transactions, of all these individual transactions. So that's the second part. And now the third part is we have to determine the duration. So for determining the duration, we all know first we have to set up the population where we have to distribute the scripts. We can either distribute this way or we can either distribute in the other way. So let me give you a quick recap on that. So here let me create population 1, which is for 01 script or 01 population, and then let me create another population. So in fact you would know, but still I would like to give you an overview of how to do this part. So now I have 3 populations, and in the first script, in the first 01 population I have 100%, and then in the second script let me change the population, let me change the script, sorry, and then in the third one. So everything now has 100%. So we can either do it in two ways. One is in the same population we can have all the scripts, we can distribute the percentage, or else we can distribute three different populations with three different scripts. In case if you have more scripts, you can keep all of them in say three separate populations. So again, the reason behind this is when you are distributing this into a percentage in scenarios like when you have 159 users and you have to distribute them into even and odd numbers, you might get an approximate number and not the exact number. So in those scenarios, you can use or you can distribute these population in this way so that you can easily give them in the numbers. So that's the reason we are distributing in this model. And then we have to set up the monitors and connectors. And then when it comes to the runtime, so here I have the first scenario where I have the population 1, where I have distributed the users into percentage, or I can create another scenario which is scenario 2, scenario underscore 02. And in this scenario, I will add the populations in three different users. So here I'm going to add just 10 minutes to the test, and then again coming back to the custom, and let me distribute just 3 users to this script. Let me change this time as well, and I have set up the time. And again, this is another best practice which I would do, which is I will click on apply to all, and this will apply the configuration to all the selected populations. In case if you have not come across this, please do try when you are running into your project. So now if I go to the other populations, you can see the time is set up to 10 minutes, but here the population is not yet set up. So for that, I'll again go back to the population 01, and I will click on apply to all at the bottom. This will set up the configuration for all the other scripts. So now you can see for all the other populations, I have set up the users to 3, and now I'm good. Let me just save it. So this is the third part, just determine the duration. So just for this demo, I'm just setting up the duration to 10 minutes, or I can even set it up to 15 minutes. So let me come back to 10 minutes because it's like too much of time consuming. Okay, the third part is the gradual ramp up. So here you can see I have gradually ramp up. So I'm starting the test with a small number. So in this scenario, since already the number is very less, I'm using it in a small number. So in case if you're using a huge load, you have to start the test with a small number of users, and gradually we have to increase the load. And the gradual ramp up simulates a realistic scenario where the user base grows over time. So that's the main reason where you have to gradually ramp up. And then the next part is the steady state. So when it comes to the steady state, so once the user load reaches a point where the system stabilizes and they will start to maintain a steady state at the target load. And this is the phase where the system operates under consistent sustained load. So we have to first we have to do a gradual ramp up, and then we have to do a steady state. And now the next part is the transaction rate control. So we have to adjust the rate of transactions to meet the specified target, and we have to ensure that the system consistently handles this transaction rate without significant fluctuation. So here in this scenario, I have just given the normal or the industry standard response think times using which I have set up the users. But in case if you want to set up based on a transaction control, you can definitely go through my pacing video where I have discussed in a complete detail way where I have given an example where we can set up the transaction control, or we can set up the transaction rate. And now the most critical part, or the most important part, which is we have to set up, or we have to identify the monitoring part. So the performance metrics, so monitoring of the performance metrics. So we have to identify, we have to capture the key metrics, which is the transaction response time, where we have to measure the time it takes for a transaction to complete, and we all know what exactly is the response time. So here at the end of the test, we will see them in the results. So we have to identify the response time if it meets the defined criteria, and then we have to get the throughput. So we have to monitor the number of transactions processed per minute, and we have to verify that it aligns with the target transaction rate. So meanwhile, while we are discussing, we will just start the test and we will discuss them during the test. So let me play the test. And then the resource utilization. So we have to track the CPU usage, we have to track the memory consumption and the other resource metrics to identify the potential bottlenecks, because even not only the response times and the throughput, even the CPU, the memory and other resource metrics will also be taken as baseline for our testing. And then the next part is we have to collect the baseline data. So once the test is completed, so what else, what's next? So we have to record, we have to document the performance metrics throughout the test, and this data set serves as the baseline for future comparisons and analysis. So I will show you, in fact, in this current video I'll show you like how to do that. And then we have to use this timestamped data for accurate correlation. So that's how we have to collect the baseline data, and then we have to use them for the correlation. And then the next part is validating the performance criteria. So at this part or at this step, we have to verify the system whether it has met or whether it has exceeded the specified performance criteria during the steady state. And also we have to ensure that there are no significant performance degradations or bottlenecks. So this is very equally critical to the place where we are collecting the response times or other metrics. So this is again, we have to validate the performance criteria. So now we have reached current user count, we have 9. So we are currently in the steady state. And now the 10th step, which is the analysis and identification. So once the test is completed, so we have to analyze the collected data to identify the patterns, their trends and the potential bottlenecks. And also we have to look for any deviations from the expected behavior, and we have to note any anomalies. Also we have to identify any spikes or drops in the performance metrics. And then the documentation part. So we have to document the test configurations, what are all the scripts we have used, what is the test environment details, which environment we use, whether it's a stage or a pre-prod or which environment did we use the test, and what are all the configurations, what is the configuration of the app server, and every other details has to be documented. And also along with that we have to add any issues that are encountered during the test. So this documentation is essential for traceability and future reference. So now we have documented. So what next? So the next part is the report findings, where we have to create a comprehensive baseline test report summarizing the results, and we have to observe for any identified areas for improvement, where we have to include the visual representations of performance metrics. So when it comes to visual representations, we have to attach the the chart or the graphs, and if possible we have to communicate the findings to the stakeholders. So far we saw about the baseline testing and what are all the things we have to do during the baseline testing. So let's discuss some other point or some other questions which I have got during my previous interactions with our subscribers until the test complete. So in one of our subscribers, so he has asked me this question. So he was facing a lot of issues for transaction. So now there are no issues. You cannot find any errors in this test, but in his test, or in fact in your test, if you are facing any issues, what can you do, or like how can you find or you want to just know what is the response? Because when you see here, you cannot find any of the responses for the users, right? So you cannot see what exactly is happening for any of the users. So what in case if you want to find a user? So in those scenarios, if you go to runtime errors, you will see which transaction is throwing an error, and then come back to the runtime users, choose the user, right click and do a follow. And once you click follow, you will be taken to the validation screen. So if you remember, when you are doing a validation, the check with this icon, that is a kind of individual check. So you will be taken to that screen. So go back to that screen, and here you can clearly see the responses. So through this, you can see if there are any issues, because I have used this several times to find what exactly is happening for a particular user. If there are any is there any data issue, or is there any correlation issue, or is there any session, is there any server issue, or any issues can be identified through this way. So I would recommend you to try this if you are facing any issues, and if you want to really find what is happening with a particular user or with a particular script. So you can try this. And in fact, you can also see, say for example, like if you are trying with multiple test data with multiple users, you can definitely see what is happening with the users. And even if you're lucky, you can also even the HTML rendering. And if not, at least you can see the values. Oh, and if you want to see, for now, like it's currently keeping on moving, right? So if you really want to stop, just click on the lock button here. And once you click on that, so it's a kind of a scroll lock. So once you click on it, it will stop scrolling. Then you can slowly, around say, you can just look for the responses, right? And so in case if you want to see it in a web manner, you can click this button. You can see the basic HTML version, or at least a front end of what you can see it. And there is one more thing where you can, if you can click on the request, you can click on this compare button and see what is the difference between your recorded request and this particular validation request. So same thing, you can check for all the requests. And also if you want to go to the next iteration, for example, if you are in this particular transaction, like the fourth script, and sorry, the fourth transaction, and you want to go to the next iteration, so what you can do is, here you can see an icon which tells you go to the next iteration in the loop. When you click on it, this will take you to the same transaction but to the next iteration. So you can click it several times until you want to see which, or like what transaction has failed. You can do go back and forth. So this is for going to the next iteration, and this is to going to the previous iteration in the loop. So you can try this, you can play around, you can find what else is happening in the test. And once, if everything is done automatically, also like for example, once the test is over, automatically this test will be completed and it will get closed, and you can start doing your actions. So if you want to start back the scrolling, you can just click on it. And the next thing is, if you close it, you can again choose another script. So for example, I'm just choosing the browse product now, and you can start to see the other transactions. So there is again one limitation. You cannot see multiple, you cannot follow multiple users at the same time. You can follow only one user at a time. So that's again the limitations which Neolode has. So but I would say it's not a limitation, because you're not going to test everything at the same time. If it is like, if you're unlucky, you'll be having at least one script that's failing at the same time. So you can open it, just check for whatever you want, the informations, and you can test it, you can check it. And if you really feel that that particular script is throwing a lot of errors, just go stop. So because when you stop it, that will actually reduce the amount of results that's getting biased. Because if one script, or like if one set of users are failing, that will actually increase or decrease the response time. So I would suggest, if something is going wrong, stop it, stop that particular user and bring it out of this test. Or if you really want, you can stop the entire test, because you, by the time you, when you follow a user, you know what is happening with that particular user, and then you can decide based on that. So now let's go back to the runtime, and here, yeah, we have crossed 8 minutes, and there are like 2 more minutes. So by the time I will tell you one more question which has been asked. So there was a subscriber, a friend, and he told that he had created scripts, each script in a different project, and now he want to run everything in the same project. So I suggested her to go to file, click on import project, bring the project, whatever project that you want, click on it and do a select, and then you can bring it. So the one thing which I told her is to make sure that the project is upgraded to the current version. Again, when telling about the version, I would want to tell you that this part of video which I'm doing for you is being done with Neolode 2023.3.2 long-term version. So this is again a latest one which I have try new, because the previous one, the previous Neoload which I used was Neoload 9.2.0, and this is a long-term version which has come recently from Neoload, and I would suggest you to try this. It's really wonderful, it's really quick, and they have fixed a lot of items, a lot of fixes in this. So I would suggest you to just try this. And the licensing part, everything is same. I have used the same licensing, everything is the same for what I have used for Neoload 9.2.0. And now, yeah, we have completed the test. So let's go back. So as I told you earlier, what are all the values that we're going to collect is the response times. So these are the transactions, and here are the response times we have, the percentile, the minimum, maximum, average, and everything that we have for the test. So you're going to set this as your baseline test. And what next? So once you have set your baseline test, and after that you are going to do another test with the same setup. You're not going to make any changes to this test. You're going to run the same test. But the next thing is, like, when you're comparing, or when you want to compare this report, so what you have to do is label this as baseline, and this is going to be your load test one, right? Let me remove all this spaces. Load test, okay. Let's go to load test one. Work. Okay. Load test one. Okay. Let me keep it as load test, okay. And so since we have the same report, so we cannot generate, but when you are running multiple tests, you can choose your second test, add a label, and you can go, sorry, let me just do it this way. So click next, you can select whatever transactions which you want, whatever the critical things which I have told you, like the response times, the CPU utilization, everything. You can add them to this report, click next, generate the report, and then once you generate a report, you can start comparing them, and you can understand how well or what has happened with your results. So whether it has been improved, or whether it is decreased, or whether it needs any improvement. So you can check all those things. So since this is a very I just have only one test, so I'm not able to show you, but when you run two tests, as I told you, you can create a comparison. So this is how we are doing the baseline testing. So I think I've answered your question. So in case if you have any other doubts or any other questions, please do comment in the comment section. And thanks again for asking this question. So until I meet you in another interesting video, it's bye bye from Asin Shanmugam and Little Slaw.